World War II was a global war that lasted from 1939 to 1945. It was primarily fought between the Axis powers led by Germany, Japan, and Italy, and the Allied powers led by the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. The war began with the German invasion of Poland and quickly spread as Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, sought to expand its territory and create a new order in Europe. The Axis powers conquered much of Europe and Africa, but were eventually defeated by the Allied powers, who gained control of both Europe and Asia. The war also saw some of the largest and most brutal battles in history, resulting in an estimated 50 million to 85 million fatalities, including 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. The dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States in August 1945 ultimately led to the unconditional surrender of Japan, bringing the war to an end. The aftermath of the war led to the formation of the United Nations and the beginning of the Cold War. World War II was a complex and multifaceted conflict that involved many of the world's major powers. The causes of the war can be traced back to the Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I and imposed heavy penalties on Germany, including significant territorial losses and large reparations payments. These penalties, along with the global economic depression, contributed to the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany and the eventual takeover by Adolf Hitler. Once in power, Hitler began to aggressively expand Germany's territory through the occupation of Austria, the Sudetenland, and eventually the rest of Czechoslovakia. In 1939, Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union and then invaded Poland, which prompted the United Kingdom and France to declare war on Germany. The Axis powers quickly conquered much of Europe, including France, and also had significant successes in Africa and Asia. The United States, which had remained neutral for much of the early war, entered the conflict in 1941 after the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan. The entry of the United States, along with the tide of the war turning against the Axis powers in North Africa and the Soviet Union, ultimately led to the defeat of the Axis powers. The war also had a significant impact on civilians, as many were killed or displaced during the conflict. Additionally, the Holocaust saw the systematic extermination of Jews and other minority groups by the Nazis, resulting in the death of millions of innocent people. The dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945 killed around 200,000 people, most of them being civilians, and eventually led to the surrender of Japan. In conclusion, World War II was a devastating global conflict that had a profound impact on the world, leading to the deaths of millions of people, the displacement of millions more, and the reshaping of the political and economic order of the world. World War II was not just a military conflict, it also had significant social, economic, and cultural impacts. Economically, the war had a profound impact on many countries. The massive mobilization of resources and manpower for the war effort led to a massive increase in government spending, which helped to pull many countries out of the Great Depression. However, the war also led to the destruction of much of Europe's infrastructure and industry, which hindered economic recovery in the post-war period. Socially, the war had a profound impact on the lives of civilians, both in the countries that were directly involved in the conflict and in those that remained neutral. Millions of people were killed or wounded, and millions more were displaced from their homes as a result of the war. Women played a significant role during the war as they replaced men in the workforce and by taking up jobs traditionally reserved for men. The war also saw a significant increase in the number of children orphaned and families displaced. Culturally, the war had a profound impact on the arts, literature, and popular culture. The war led to a significant increase in government censorship and propaganda, as well as a shift in the themes and styles of art, literature, and film. The war also had a significant impact on the fashion industry, as shortages of materials and a shift in societal norms led to a change in styles. The war also had significant impact on the scientific and technological developments as well. Many technologies that we use today, such as radars, jet engines, and computers, were developed during the war. In addition, the war led to the creation of the United Nations, an international organization that aimed to promote peace and security around the world. But it also led to the beginning of the Cold War, a period of political tension between the Western powers and the Soviet Union that lasted for decades. Overall, World War II was one of the most significant events in human history, with far-reaching impacts on politics, society, culture, and the economy that are still felt today. The war also had a significant impact on the various colonial empires at the time. The war weakened the European colonial powers and led to a wave of decolonization as many colonized peoples around the world began to demand greater autonomy and independence. In Asia, Japan's defeat led to the end of its empire and the withdrawal of its troops from the territories it had occupied. This enabled the emergence of independent states such as India, Pakistan, and Indonesia. Similarly, in Africa, the war contributed to the weakening of the colonial powers and the eventual emergence of independent African states. On the other hand, the war also had a major impact on the Middle East. The European colonial powers that controlled much of the region before the war were unable to maintain their control during the conflict. This power vacuum led to increased nationalism movements and ultimately led to the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and ongoing tensions in the region. The war also resulted in significant population displacement and led to the creation of refugees around the world. Millions of people were forced to flee their homes due to the war, and many were unable to return after the conflict ended. The post-war period also saw significant political changes around the world. The war led to the fall of fascist regimes in Italy and Germany and the rise of communist governments in Eastern Europe and Asia. This led to the division of the world into two spheres of influence, with the Western powers led by the United States and the Eastern Bloc led by the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cold War. In summary, World War II was a global conflict with far-reaching effects on the world, including the reshaping of the international order, decolonization, population displacement, and significant political, social, and economic changes. The aftermath of the war continued to shape the world we live in today, from the political boundaries to the way we live our everyday lives. In addition to the major impact on the political, social, and economic aspects of the world, the World War II also had significant environmental impact. During the war, both Axis and Allied powers engaged in practices that damaged the environment on a large scale. For example, large-scale bombing campaigns by the Allies destroyed many cities and industrial areas, which led to the release of pollutants into the air and water. Axis powers engaged in deforestation to fuel their war machine and caused serious ecological damage. On a smaller scale, many of the technologies and tactics used in the war had negative effects on the environment. For example, the use of chemical weapons like mustard gas and herbicides like Agent Orange had long-lasting harmful effects on the environment and human health. The post-war period also had its environmental impacts, as the world struggled to rebuild and recover from the devastation of the war. In many areas, this rebuilding process came at the cost of the environment, as large areas of land were cleared for new housing, industry, and infrastructure. Many countries adopted a modernization approach, heavily invested in heavy industry, which led to air and water pollution, deforestation, and habitat destruction. In conclusion, World War II had a profound impact on the world, not only in terms of human lives, political and social changes, but also on the environment. The ecological impact of the war had lasting effects and has played an important role in shaping our present world.